Um, I was talking to An, and she didn't want to do the vlog, but Nirvana's In Utero. I've been a huge Nirvana fan my entire life, and there's a lot of things I just osmoted and just took for granted that I assumed other people understood, but may not necessarily be the case at all. But I was explaining to her that the concept behind In Utero, and that's largely just from having absorbed a lot of the culture and surrounding that. And I was a huge nerve head, like, when I was younger. And yeah, like, Kurt Cobain was, like, really attractive. But In Utero is about the period in Kurt Cobain's life before he kills himself. In Utero is basically a suicide album. I don't know, there's so many ideas, but we're talking about Heart-Shaped Box. And Heart-Shaped Box, to me, is like, my understanding is kind of like the basic premise of the album. It's kind of like Nirvana's version of Pink Floyd The Wall. Too bad there was never like a video documentary, a video piece of film art that went along as an entire movie to the album or something, because that would have been really cool. But basically, I think what happened was that Courtney Love was in the UK and had an abortion and an affair. And this is what drove Kurt Cobain to write this album. I don't know if the suicide was always planned, but like it's very much true that like you kill yourself at the peak of your adulthood at 27 or something, and you're infamous, and you become even more infamous, and you live on forever. And you know, your family, like your children, inherits all the royalties and everything. But there's so many like clues in this. It's kind of like picking apart clues and trying to figure things out, but there's so many clues in this album that it's like, it's hard to overlook the fact that this is kind of like a diary suicide kind of album. It's kind of macabre. One of the things I'd point, there's a lot of things about Nirvana that I've liked over the years. I found really, really interesting about them. Maybe I'll talk some more on it later. One of the things that was really interesting about Nirvana was the backbeat. Like, you look at a lot of the albums. If you look at like Bleach was very much a grunge album. Nirvana was very much a new wave band. They were like a new wave hard rock band, new wave / grunge kind of band. And which is kind of different than the alternative kind of thing that was happening. That was maybe more like in the veins of like Smashing Pumpkins, but with Nirvana, like if you listen to the music, it's like Scentless Apprentice is like dun 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 dun. And there's so many like new wave songs like My Sharona, dun 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 dun. It's the same kind of like formula. It's just slightly different. It's a variation of it, you know, as opposed to like something like About a Girl, which is like it's a backbeat. Backbeat was really, really popular in the late 80s and early 90s. It was kind of a throwback to like the 60s and the Beatles. A lot of like the whole grunge thing fused a lot of the 60s into grunge. You know, kind of like Sex Pistols meets the Hollies meets Neil Young, you know, it's very odd in that way. But when you look at all the lyrics, it's like something like Penny Royal Tea. Penny Royal Tea is about a tea that people used to use to induce abortion. I don't know, if you look at Heart-Shaped Box, you look at the lyrics, it's very much about like something like, it's kind of a, I mean, the cover in itself has kind of a afterworldly kind of like theme to it with the angel. And then there's this kind of like gritty meat sack kind of thing going on, atomical with the body. And in the title too, In Utero, like tear-o, like crying. Then there's En Utero. So En Utero, like En is in French, and it's also endoscopy. Endoscopy is like En is to enter in the body into an orifice or something. Utero, the uterus, uterine lining, vaginal canal. And the tear-o is just kind of like about crying or something. There's so many things to it, like All Apologies. All Apologies is very much a suicide song. You know, there's a lyric in it about like married, buried. I don't know, there's just so many things. What else can I say? Everyone is gay. Maybe Kurt Cobain was bisexual. There's some theory that he was a big R.E.M. fan. He had some sort of connection to the singer of R.E.M. who was bisexual. There's the Gus Van Sant movie that kind of suggests some aspect of bisexuality, homosexuality. I don't know, there's just so many things about that album. If you listen to Heart-Shaped Box again, and you listen to the guitar parts, the guitar parts sound like baby whales. Like it's actually like note for note, like, so it's like up to like the flat seventh, but basically from, you know, from the start of a baby whale pitch to the high point, or like, kind of thing. So like there's like this like, even the guitar is designed to have this kind of like, kind of like growl to it, like a baby cry. If you listen to it, there's like this like baby cry thing kind of going on to it. If you look at the album art is a bunch of like aborted fetuses on the back. I don't know if they're aborted, but there's just like a lot of fetuses on the back. It's sort of like to denote an abortion. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the other thing about it too is Kurt Cobain supposedly had a really, really bad attention deficit disorder. People with attention disorder, being in the autistic spectrum, often are very clingy. They get very hurt very easily. They get very attached to people, and they get hurt. They're very sensitive and they get hurt very easily at the same time. And so I think for someone like Kurt Cobain, or someone who had attention disorder, which may be partly due to attention disorder, sometimes I wonder if it's not partly due to neglect or genetic or both or something, because it's actually an abundance of attention, not a lack of attention. So it's kind of like a hyper focus of vigilant attention that maybe you develop as an infant, to know when something's coming, and if it's not coming, you just become that much more focused on it. But they also become people like that also become very, very attached to other people. Even in terms, I think, of sometimes figuring things out and making their way through the world. I don't know, you look at something like the song Tourette's. Before people commit suicide, and I've known people who are like this, and I've been like that, they're just like really, really high strung, really, really high stress level, and they develop like tics and twitches and whatnot. I kind of get things like that. Like I do this one sometimes, or I shuffle, or I rock, or I like touch my hair, do these repetitive kind of things, or like anger. I don't know, just different tics and twitches that result as like a lot of stress. I don't know if I've ever been diagnosed with Tourette's, but I know, all apologies, there's some interesting things about the album too where they bury lyrics. So it's like, all in all is all we are, but there's another line going, all alone is all we are. I've seen online sometimes you take the lyrics and you turn them around, which is probably very, very much deliberate. It wouldn't surprise me in the least that if it was done deliberately to give just another message to it, you know, that if you turn it around, because a lot of the lyrics are very inane, but if you turn them around, they have a different meaning. So if you take a 4-track recorder, right, and you just flip the deck, you know, and play it, what was recorded on the other side is now playing backwards. It's just very easy to figure out how to do these different things. I used to do this all the time. I used to like record a solo, turn around backwards, and then steal riffs from it. Steal all these like backwards sounding riffs and try to make my playing sound backwards. That's kind of cool. Or just use a whole entire chord progression backwards, like Hendrix did on Love or Confusion or something. And another interesting thing about the In Utero album is in the artwork. It gives you a tonal suggestion, an EQ balance suggestion. So it puts the bass way down and then brings the treble up some. And in that area, they were kind of like messing around with the bass treble, and they had like all these like hall effects and stuff like that. It was awful. But a lot of people had like the bass all jacked up, and then the treble was not quite up to the bass. So it was like a hiss, boom, crack kind of sound all the time. And he kind of like reverted it back to like a 70s sort of thing. But there is a thing about equalization in bass treble, mid-range or something kind of thing, is if you turn it all the way down and then turn it up kind of like accordingly, you know, so that it has a certain balance, but it's not overpowering the volume, it's not the volume, and then turn the volume up, you get like this way better sound to it. You get a way better sound to it, and especially too, like a lot of, I don't know if people still do this nowadays, but like a lot of engineering back then, back in the 70s and stuff like that, was to, how was it going to sound within 4 speakers in your car or your truck, right? In a small encased area, because so many people listen to so much music whilst they drive or travel here and there. You know, and car speakers are usually really good speakers, and it's a way of like getting a really good sound test. I've heard of like producers and stuff like that who literally go out and take their music, especially I think hip-hop producers a lot, and they put it in their car and they listen to it in their car, and if they can get the right balance of what it is that they want in the speakers in the car, the right sound, that's as good as it's going to get. And the album's kind of set for that too. Another thing I would say about the In Utero album is just how different it was. Like how different it was, and how much how outside it was of what was going on of everything else. It was like unique and special and individualistic on all of its own in the chord progressions. Like there was like a lot of people like crap on Kurt Cobain and say that he really didn't know what he was doing. He was just a dumb punk grunge guitarist, and he would tell you, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just playing power chords or something. I say hogwash. That he knew exactly what he was doing. Like a lot of the time he was playing stuff that was modal, you know. Or a big thing back in the 90s was putting the major third and minor third riffs or chord progressions or something together, putting a major minor chord progression together, and just kind of like it just being modal rock and roll, modal pop music. And another aspect to all of Nirvana's music was pop. You know, it very much had like pop sensibilities. There was it was something almost nursery rhyme-ish about it that you could like sing along to, even if you couldn't hear the lyrics. And one of the things too about the interesting about like garbled lyrics is that it makes people try to figure out like, okay, what are they saying? What did the lyrics, when they bury the lyrics somewhat, it annoys me when they bury the lyrics somewhat, and then it makes me work to discern what the singer is saying. But through the accent and his mannerism of singing and stuff like that, you kind of go and it forces your ear to kind of come in and listen. But like a lot of the abstract stuff, a lot of the abstract sounds, the different unique sounds that like nobody else was using, really, was something that made that album like really, really cool and special. There's some cool guitar effects on it. His guitar playing often had its own interesting sound because he used like cheap gear or gear that nobody else was using. Like nobody else was really using the Sans is it a modulator? I guess it's a modulator of sorts. Sans amp that mimic different amp sounds. But one of the interesting things about In Utero is that it doesn't have any Buddhist connotations. Apparently Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love were both Buddhists. I think Kurt Cobain, judging by the influence, he was more of a Chan Zen kind of Buddhist, and I think Courtney Love was more of the SGI. I can't remember what the full name is. SGI Buddhist. They chant the Namyo Renge Kyo. But like if you look back like on the Nevermind album and Nirvana, there's this thing I came across the web of Kurt Cobain's an autographed Boss distortion pedal, and on it he wrote Nirvana. And anybody who's Buddhist knows that like the R's, like in the Heart Sutra when they say Avalokiteshvara, it's Avalokiteshvara. The V's and R's and whatnot come up to be W's, and he wrote on this pedal Nirvana. And that was how the correct pronunciation of it. But it was also very like, the album was also very soundscapey, like just the way that he like used all kinds of different effects and growls, the way he used sound in of itself to make that album was just like a really amazing album. In Utero was probably my favorite album of them all because it's the most like in-depth, most complicated, most like search out for clues kind of thing. It leaves a person guessing, or leaves a person thinking, and it's also probably at the same time too one of the most like primal, guttural, heartfelt, emotional albums. And apparently one of the tricks too, the way it was recorded, was they used a lot of like just these big like German microphones to just capture the sound and whatnot. I don't know, but it's interesting, like in the Nevermind, we have the baby chasing a dollar bill on a hook through the water. That's very much a Buddhist statement. So it's kind of like this idea that we're all like swimming in nirvana, and nirvana is like so close it's on the skin, but you don't know it. And part of the reason why you don't know it is because we're chasing after delusions, or we are so caught up in greed. We're born into greed, kind of thing. But In Utero was very much a return to kind of the new wave roots, and a lot of 90s had kind of like especially the more pop oriented kind of music, it had a lot of new wave into it, like something like Elastica, for example, or Blur was very new wave. A lot of Brit pop had a lot of new wave into it, pulp, things like that. A lot of American metal rock of that area had a lot of metal punk. But to say he didn't know what he was doing, like artistically or musically, I think that's completely wrong. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. I think he was quite well educated on what he was doing, and he probably put a lot of time into making it look as simple and effortless as possible. But he probably studied like rock and contemplated how to create all these like different fusions of genres, and how to get different sounds and just stuff along that line. But yeah, I think In Utero is largely about what was going on in his life in that time with his wife and his child, and with the abortion, I don't quite know. Was the abortion from an affair? Was the abortion, did she abort one of his children? I don't know. I don't think any of us ever got that piece of information.